I'm Tom Zerega, the founder and CEO of Magnetic 3D, and I'm excited because today is the first time that we're doing our own podcast. I'm getting to be the host, so please don't hold it against me. This is my first time at bat, and I'm going to do my best here. But I've got an amazing guest who literally wrote the book on virtual reality technology. There's really not many ways that, or very often that you get to say something like that. So I'm joined here by Dr. Greg Burdea, who's the professor emeritus at Rutgers University. He's also the CTO of Bright Cloud International. So we'll have to learn a little bit more about Bright Cloud later in the show. But he has up to, I think, the third edition of virtual reality technology, and the market has just exploded over the last decade with VR, AR, and XR technology. So I couldn't be more thrilled to have this conversation and our fireside chat. But we're both in Florida, so we're going to call it our poolside chat.
Poolside chat. Yeah. Yeah, that fits. That
Yeah.
fits. Well, thanks, Tom. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for inviting me. We know each other for a while, actually, from previous editions of the.
Yes.
But before I start talking a little bit about the book and what it means and how it structured the field, I have to acknowledge who actually invented the field of VR.
Hmm.
Um, and for an engineer like me, it's humbling to understand that the field was not invented by an engineer.
Hmm.
It was invented by a cinematographer, Morton Heiling, in the 60s. So another, cold shower, if you were, is that this is not really a new field. It is a reborn field, but it comes back then from 1960s. So
Hmm.
Morton invented what's called the sensorama, which is a multi-sensorial arcade where you would sit on a vibrating chair, uh, uh, riding a motorcycle. So there were real prompts, real, motorcycles, uh, acceleration and so on, brakes, and then you were in front of a stereo display, two large displays,
Hmm.
and then he also had two other interesting things. So he had haptics, he had sound, interacting sound, but he had haptics. So the simulation was the ride through Brooklyn.
Hmm.
So necessarily you are going to hit some potholes, and the simulator will start changing, and then you would pass by a pizza store, a pizza place,
Hmm.
and then he would introduce some the odor of a pepperoni,
Hmm.
or the smell, I should say, of pepperoni, and so he had uh, olfactory feedback, he had haptics, that sound, he had 3D graphics. The only thing he didn't have was taste, right?
Hmm.
Which even today is not really commercially available.
Hmm.
So, and this was in 1960 something, and
Hmm.
he wanted to take it to the next play order of magnitude to create a whole theater like this, and went to RCA,
Hmm.
which at the time, the company does not exist to my knowledge today, but at the time was a leading TV maker in the United States, and also into recordings and other things. So he went to them and said, look, I have this invention, because he had patented, and I want to, really bring it to the market, but I need money. I mean, I
Hmm.
can't, so why don't you guys invest in this technology? But then, just like today, the people in power are not necessarily the ones with most of imagination
Hmm.
or appetite for risk. On the contrary.
Yeah.
So they
Sounds
says,
familiar.
go ahead and continue. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Anybody who raises red knows. So go ahead. It's not yet ready for prime time. Go ahead and continue developing it. And when you're ready, come back to us. Well, there was nothing to come back because RCA went bankrupt.
Yep.
That was the end of that.
Yep. Sounds like a
And
Kodak
yeah,
story, huh?
yeah, yeah. And to make the story short, because we could spend the whole podcast just talking about the history of VR. But many years after, uh, it was the first, explosion, or I should say the mini explosion of VR was at the end of the 80s and beginning of the 90s, so last
Hmm.
century, and the first commercial products with the first head-mounted display, the first dedicated computer, VR system, um, and unfortunately, and the first VR movie,
Hmm.
which was called, if you recall, The Lone More Man. It's a classic. So
Hmm.
people who really want to know the history of VR should go and watch this movie, The Lone More Man.
Hmm.
But what people will not see, understand as a viewer, is that the hardware was so slow. So, by the way, this was before NVIDIA came to exist, right? So the hardware was so slow that you needed a mainframe to compute a few frames of graphics,
Hmm.
right? So nothing was real time. There was a very laborious and expensive thing, but that's where things started.
Yeah.
So to bring it to the present, within this half half a century of VR development, we went from mainframes and dedicated rack-based computers to give you the power that was needed, even if at the very low resolution and a very low frame rate. Then we went to, in at the beginning of this century, to the PC being king. That's when the gaming hardware came. That's when NVIDIA was dominating and still
Hmm.
does.
And you got to be tethered,
Um,
you know.
yes, tethered systems, exactly. So you had tethered head mounts, and you had the desktop graphics card, which would create the scene.
Hmm.
Um, but the advantage was it was much cheaper than uh, the reality engine, and which was created by Silicon Graphics. So Silicon Graphics was the big producer of VR hardware, computing hardware at the time, but no longer is in that business because of the PC. No, people didn't want to pay a lot of money for the graphics.
Hmm.
And then finally today, yet the third iteration, and that's one of the reasons that prompted the third edition of the book, was the all-in-one head-mounted displays, for example, and
Hmm.
the much better large, the display arrays that you have these days. So the graphics and the computing, to some extent, have made tremendous progress,
Hmm.
and now also haptics has become accepted as an additional sensorial channel. People like to feel what they see, not just look. And then on finally, also you have products which head mounts, for example, or desktop systems, which include various aromas, and all of that is in. So that's the olfactory channel. So 4 of the 5 human senses are now present in today's VR at
Hmm.
very, very economic prices. So
Hmm.
there's been a popularization, an opening of the access, um, and many other aspects, which I'm sure we'll touch on today.
Hmm.
But that was also a reason for me to rewrite completely. So essentially, I had to rewrite 95+% of the book
Hmm.
to produce the third edition, which you see here today. It's not a thin book; it's a 700-page plus textbook, and to try to encompass everything. So, the speaking as an author, the
Hmm.
difficulty today is too much good stuff
For
that
sure.
you still have to manage it, structure it, organizing it, and make it available in the format of a textbook.
Hmm.
Finally, to finish talking about the book, an additional thing which we did for the first time in this edition was to have an online, freely available student companion website, because it's not enough to read books in VR. You really need to know how to do real-time programming.
Hmm.
And real-time, as you well know, Tom, real-time programming, graphics programming is much more demanding than pure computer graphics, which is not time constrained.
Hmm.
So you can have beautiful images, right? High res, large images, but they will be pretty much static or change very little or change very slowly. But in a real, in a VR, the element of real-time interaction is mandatory for many reasons that we'll probably go into sometime in this poolside chat.
Hmm.
And so you need to learn how to code. And then we were fortunate that Unity 3D became freely available for the student. And so we created our own with Daniel, a former student of mine, Daniel Gwen, he's brilliant at coding VR. And he and I created this lab manual that is now freely downloadable for anyone who wants it. You
Yeah.
want the book, you don't want the book, you can go to the student website and get this, because it's important to help the education.
Yeah, we'll definitely we'll have to get links to some of these resources and put them
Sure.
online. Obviously, a link to the
Yeah.
book, link to the
Yeah.
these lab editions and everything that
Yeah.
they can tap into. Um, yeah, it's pretty amazing how far things have come in what is actually relatively a short period of time, especially like with the miniaturization of the electronics and whatnot, and getting down to head mounted. The technology obviously is being subsidized to the tune of billions of dollars by the large tech companies, maybe even in the trillions over the last decade, or headed there. But before we dive into that part of the topic, I was just wondering, like, what got you into this technology? I know you had a background in robotics, if I remember, and then you
So
jumped in.
yes, Tom, you're very close to what actually happened. So I came into VR from a pure robotics researcher.
Hmm.
Um, and I had patented what I think, and people think that was the first haptic glove, which
Hmm.
means something you hold in your hand and let's say you squeeze a virtual ball, but actually you will feel if that board is soft or hard.
Yeah, like Ready Player
And
One
then
for people, it's like the beginning of the Ready Player One.
exactly that was the beginning, and then and Disney in the Avatar. If you remember
Hmm.
the first Avatar,
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
the battle at the end of the movie, where this guy is teleoperating the villain, right? Is
Hmm.
teleoperating this big bot and fights the natives, right?
Hmm.
And in that planet, and then he's controlling his weapons with an exact replica of my glove, you know.
Yeah.
So here is to Disney, yeah.
Yeah.
They haven't told me about it, but I'm glad that they love the concept,
You got to
because
get
they
your
didn't.
licensing fee. I don't know.
Yeah, well, you know how that goes.
Yeah.
But no, but listen, as a professor, I'm putting my professor hat there. It was really flattering to me
Hmm.
that they thought that was a great concept and they put it into the movie,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
so into a famous movie.
And we're seeing
Yeah,
like that kind of we're seeing that in sci-fi over the years, right? Like from The Matrix,
yeah,
we've seen some
exactly.
of that
Yeah,
where they're inside the mech suit and they're controlling them, and now today we even have like remote operated vehicles. I've seen Caterpillar has their own system where they're controlling it, and I even saw something recently in China where there's an entire uh, armada, if you will, of dump trucks and excavators, and they just do everything autonomously. And then there's people that can take over. So we're really moving into that realm now. So you had your finger on the pulse back then. So um,
um, my problem was not lack of ideas. I had the same problem Morton Highly had. There was a lack of funding,
yeah.
not the ideas. But that's being as it may. but you're right, Tom. So thinking about it, it made me think a little bit of where we're heading. So I know we spoke about the early years, but also we should look at where this field is going.
Mm-hmm.
So it's no longer just VR, it's what they call XR,
Mm-hmm.
extended reality.
Mm-hmm.
And XR has several flavors. You have virtual reality, you have augmented reality, you have mixed reality. That all encompassing term is XR.
Mm-hmm.
And that I'm sure probably we will revisit this when we're going to talk about applications, because people don't do VR for the sake of VR.
Mm-hmm.
People do VR because it really solves tremendous needs,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so the growth is directly related to finding not a killer app, right? But the kinder app, the
Mm-hmm.
kinder app.
Mm-hmm.
That's not my term. Is Skip Rizzo is a friend of mine. He's professor at USC in Los Angeles, and a VR evangelist. But before seeing the light, so to speak, and getting into VR, he was a practicing psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
So he was seeing patients and saw the difficulty clinicians then and today, to some extent, have addressing the big need. So and also sometimes the need for specialization and so on. So VR will let's make what I consider an important point.
Mm-hmm.
This is the this is the thing. VR technology will not replace a human, but will serve as a force amplifier. You know, just like robots and drones are force amplifiers on the battlefield today, and it allows the soldier to do more
Mm-hmm.
and safer. VR will allow the professional to do more and safer than a single person can do for many reasons, including need of lack of sleep and so on and so forth. So,
Mm-hmm.
VR will not. That's an important point, because some of my distinguished colleagues had what I think uninspired uh, saying that, oh, VR will replace you. So no, if you it any I don't care what field it is, if you tell the professional, hey, this technology will replace you, you are assured that nothing will be adopted,
No.
nothing will translate into that particular field, and especially medicine, because traditionally medicine, for many reasons, medical care is very conservative when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to change, including technology. So you better work with them and not against them. So that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in I know we'll talk about the applications later on, and my career path has been robotics VR and then medical applications of VR. So I'm very much into how this technology can be used in various areas. In fact, the textbook has a whole section on medical applications, which also extends its interest to not just IT people and technologists, but also to the clinicians, who normally are not exposed to anything like that. So the danger is we are in silos. We are in thinking
Mm-hmm.
silos, right?
Yeah.
Engineers talk to engineers, and technologists, clinicians talk to clinicians, and the invention is always, as you know, at the boundary between domains, not inside the domain.
Well, and I don't know if you found the same problems in healthcare that we're encountering, but there's a lack of standards. And I think that's also slowing down the adoption because like you might have the clinician who wants to use the technology and has come up with the use case, but then from an IT standpoint, we need to get over the hurdles of HIPAA requirements and integrating with systems. So yeah, it's kind of we're still in the first inning, maybe on the adoption cycle, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about it.
I would say the players just came out of the box. We're
Yeah.
not even on the field,
Yeah.
but 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 okay. So my thought is, and it's an important point. I'm glad you kind of led me in that direction. you can be a very good programmer, right? And
Hmm.
you can have tremendous technology, but if it's not practical for the clinician in a clinical space, it's not going
Right.
to be adopted.
Hmm.
So to give you two examples, quick, um, you you can tell that engineers and programmers are not taught how to uh, program games which are made for clinical applications. They
Hmm.
are taught to do games that kill people, explosions, the more realistic, the better, and so on and so forth. The danger, however, especially when you deal with people who have cognitive impairments, which means their brain is no longer 100%, is that you are overwhelming your patient with how much information, visually, especially, as you know, the vision, your company is essentially in the vision channel domain, which is
Hmm.
the dominant,
Hmm.
right? But it can also overflow. It's called sensorial overflow.
Hmm.
So you're essentially, for again, this particular type of patients who have difficulty comprehending what they're looking at, you don't want to throw everything at them. You want to
Hmm.
simplify, and you definitely don't want explosions, because certain neurological conditions, you can actually trigger seizures by just playing the sound of explosions or bright lights in your scene. So it's whole
Hmm.
different requirements. And the best, in my experience, has been to actually co-design. In other words, have mixed teams of technologists and clinicians working together, and then you have the best of both worlds.
Hmm. And so, there's a lot of potential use cases, but to use your term earlier, is there like a kinder application that you see
Yeah.
immediately in healthcare that has like widespread appeal?
Yes. Yes. I say actually two, if I may. So one is relating to surgical simulators.
Hmm.
Because up to the advent of the surgical simulator, and I'm talking the virtual reality surgical simulator, not the
Hmm.
boxes and little rubber chicken that you cut, no,
Yeah.
um, has been you and perfectly accepted within the medical school and field, is you learn on your patient. So I remember, I remember a very, very famous eye surgeon speaking, being the keynote speaker at one of the early hybrid VR medical conferences, um, appropriately called Medicine Meets VR. And that started unsurprisingly in California. So this fellow comes and he gives his keynote speech. And then at the end, I come and approach him and I say, well, I'm just curious, how many surgeries did you have to do to get to the skill that you have shown us? He said 10,000 eye surgeries.
Wow.
Well, I'm telling you, I don't want to be within those 10,000 or the
Yeah.
first 1,000 for
Yeah.
sure. All right. So VR provides with a safe learning environment in which you can make mistakes, but you only damage a virtual patient.
Hmm.
Okay. And that opens also, looking at the future, the modality of not just training the student into VR,
Hmm.
with the simulators, but also incorporating that into certification and recertifications, because surgeons, for example, have to be recertified, I believe, every 5 years, depends on the
Hmm.
country. But right now it's all either a paper and pencil based multi question answers, multi option questionnaire, or maybe some, I'm not sure because I'm not a surgeon, some surgery done under supervision, but you could replace, for example, a portion of this process by having them being tested on the simulator and see their level of proficiency.
Hmm.
Okay, so that's one kinder app, right,
Yep.
or class, and
Hmm.
the other one is something more dear to me because I've been uh, in that field. People don't know. First of all, I called the field, I named the field virtual rehab.
Hmm.
So means the use of virtual reality in rehab and therapy.
Hmm.
So first, of course, clinicians in that field were resisting and say, why do you give this name virtual rehab? People would think that's not real.
Not real. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is
It's
real.
sort of rehab. It's
So,
kind
and
of.
in fact, I started the first society, which exists even today. In 2008, I started the International Society on Virtual Rehab
Hmm.
because I saw, just like IEEE, which of course you're familiar with,
Hmm.
you need a society to, especially to structure the field and to give awards and to, recognize the young and rising, because you help them, and through them the field, right,
Absolutely.
grow, right.
By the way, your
So,
computer's bouncing a little, just so you're aware.
oh, it's me, I apologize.
No worries.
So the pool furniture, the real
When your
furniture,
feet up on a float, that's what it is.
yeah. So yeah, and thanks for that. I started a society, and I also started a conference, an international conference on virtual rehab.
Hmm.
And it's been going on now for uh, you know, 15, 16, 17 years.
That's awesome.
And it's indeed international. So every country we do it in, it will grow the field in that country, and so on. So,
That's so
and
good.
the reason virtual reality is so important in rehab and therapy
Hmm.
is because, on one hand, to get change, to learn how to do movements, or to reinvigorate your memory, you need repetition.
Hmm.
You need to repeat the task, so that the therapist, if you go into a clinic, is going to tell you, do this 50 times or do this 30, whatever, right? But our brain is conditioned so that the brain decouples from repetition as a self-preservation mechanism. We don't like repetitive things, right?
Hmm.
And yet you need that. So the question then becomes, is there a solution which both allows the repetition, at the same time it keeps the patient engaged in the
Hmm.
whatever task the patient is supposed to do?
And is that like just out of curiosity,
Yeah, yeah,
is that like
yeah.
a dopamine issue where you keep doing the same thing over and over again and you don't get the reward from doing it?
Yeah, but what you are very close to the answer. But what do you think would be a reward for them to do it? Because they need to repeat.
Okay. So that can be
So
programmed into the virtual reality game, I suppose.
yes, exactly.
Hmm.
So some people call them serious games.
Hmm.
I call them virtual rehabilitation games. Clearly, games designed from the start around a rehab scenario. So the patient does that, but since it's a game, they don't get decoupled. Mentally, they are in there, and
Hmm.
in the process, the brain gets rewired.
Hmm.
So what we do and I don't want to, bore your audience with neuroscience, but
What
the term
audience?
is
I don't
called.
know. There's not a lot of people listening.
They all ran
All
away.
five of them. No,
Okay,
just
so
kidding.
so so there there is the so the way to change, relearn to use an arm, for example, after a stroke, or recover from loss of memory, is to rewire the brain.
Hmm.
And this is based on what's called brain plasticity. So the brain is actually almost like a dough.
Hmm.
And what we do is reshape the patient's brain without medication. Nothing we do requires medication, which has a whole bunch of good sides to it.
Yeah.
And uh, and since it's a game, and you introduce rewards, like you're talking about rewards, right? You
Hmm.
can display, oh, you're great, or you can do applause, or so rewards, virtual rewards, and people have done it. People have benefited and in my research and many others, by the way, I spoke about Skip Rizzo, famous VR scientist, Tamar Weiss in Israel, many people in Canada also. Um, in their own practice, they saw the benefit of this.
Hmm.
But I give a lot of information of that in my book. So to make the story short, as an engineer, right? I'm not a
Hmm.
doctor, but I'm through this technology equally able to change some and have changed somebody's life
In the real world.
in the real world. And this is tremendously satisfying.
Yeah.
And I'll
Hmm.
give you one quick example.
Hmm.
There's something called cerebral palsy. Cerebral palsy. People may be less familiar with it's a form of stroke which happens just before or at birth. So the kid, will never have a good day in his or her life because you are born and yet you want to have as able of a life as you can.
Hmm.
And before I got a call in the middle, it wasn't in the middle of the night, but it was I was at Rutgers doing a lot of long hours, and I get a call from Dr. Gulomb at Indiana Medical School. I never met her. She learned about me, what I was doing with people with stroke.
Hmm.
And she said, well, it's great what you're doing, but here I am a pediatric neurologist and I have these kids and nobody is doing anything with them. And on top of it, none of the current treatments work. So
Right.
imagine that these kids have, the ones I worked with, a hand like this. They are
Hmm.
unable, because of tonicity, to even open their fingers.
Hmm.
So that's not an easy patient if you were to now put a glove on
Hmm.
and interact with VR. And Botox was one of the treatments, but Botox only works 6 months, and after that, you're back where you started.
Hmm.
And other, surgery does not work because the kid is still developing. These were all
Hmm.
teenagers that we actually did a study. We developed a new system together. So what we did is we hacked the PlayStation 3. We hacked it. We installed our own therapeutic games on the PlayStations, but not using the graphics boards, PlayStation is a Japanese design, and the graphics chip is closed. You cannot access it. So it
Hmm.
had to be also simple game just because you didn't have dedicated. I only had, the primary CPU and those parallel architecture, but not the graphics board.
Hmm.
Okay, so we created our own games. My students, I was going to say kids, professors call their students kids.
Kids.
All right, so my kids, instead of going on a spring vacation, ended up going to Indiana and installing PlayStations at really in the boondocks.
Hmm.
In 1 hour out of Indianapolis, there are no therapists.
Hmm.
There are only parents who have to work, and then they have also to care for these kids.
Yeah, there's the other
And
challenge
can
of the treatment, right?
Yes. So
Hmm.
the solution was to, number one, place it in the home so they don't have to travel anywhere. They don't have to lose pay to take their kid to the city,
Hmm.
and it can be done almost every day. So when you have somebody like that who's very impaired and you need to really do half a year, 11 months, a full year of home therapy, but then there's a reward. After this, the kid that started like this opened and then started driving, which, for a teenager is like the dream, right?
Amazing.
So change his life.
Of course, yeah. The
Yeah.
impact of that can't be understated, really.
And it was published all over the world because we were the
Yeah.
first to do it. And it all started from a doctor who cared,
Yeah.
who contacted me, right?
And
So
I
kudos to her. So the bottom line is just because the book is about VR, it
Hmm.
doesn't mean that everything is just code and hardware.
Right.
There's a lot more to it
Right.
that 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 the technologist has to be aware of, how much need there is for technology like yours, haptics, head mounts, and so on. There's
Yeah.
a lot of need.
Yeah, and I think it's up to us and I think those working on standards to also try and remove a lot of the barriers to entry and the red tape. Because if you're a clinician, your primary responsibility is to the patient. And if it's difficult to implement some of these, whether it's an economic issue or mobility, getting the technology to the home or dealing with insurance, maybe some of these breakthrough solutions never make it. And
Well,
that's upsetting, you know?
yeah, yes,
People's
but
lives.
the good news is, and I'm not going to get into a lot of technical details, but in the United States at least, for the doctor to be or therapist to be paid, you have to be reimbursed. So you submit to the insurance company, and then you have to use some codes, right?
Hmm.
And the good news is that some of the technology that Bright Cloud, for example, developed was used in clinical practice
Hmm.
under existing codes. So just because you use VR, you don't need new codes.
That's great.
You just use the existing clinical codes, except that the treatment is VR based,
Right.
but it's still a treatment for that particular condition. And
Hmm.
you, like, for example, occupational therapy, exercises if you're talking about the upper body, right?
Yeah.
So you don't need, and that's very important. The other important part is how do you navigate the procurement, the capital. If it's a capital equipment, that is a whole other level of difficulty anywhere, not just in a hospital, anywhere.
That's the 5 hour podcast.
There so try to make the system price below the threshold
Yeah.
of capital equipment, and
Hmm.
it's going to be a whole lot easier. And also, if that's a new client, it actually opens the doors, because the way this typically these days, everything is a chain of clinics. If one clinic is successful, all the other clinics in the chain will want to copy. So you
Yeah.
are going to end up having more sales, even though you only dealt with one at the beginning.
Well, it's great to know that that VR can be somewhat agnostic from those codes as part of the treatment and what insurance will approve. Um,
I mean, if you let me just quickly add this. So if you are a CEO who is trying to raise for a startup, let's say, and you have a product that does this and this, that, um, do not tell your potential investors that this needs a new code,
yeah,
because then that's a kiss of death
when you get the dial
for the
tone.
for yeah. So no, and that's true. I mean, you can say that if you think it's going to make you more interesting, but it's going to kill the deal.
Hmm.
So no, use the existing codes is very important. Integrate, change yourself to the existing landscape rather than try to change the landscape for you, at least at the beginning, until you gain more reputation and funding, and then you can start being more, you know, change more revolutionary if you want.
Yeah, you got to be like Uber a little bit, right? You just launch and see what happens.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Or Amazon at the beginning, if you think about it.
right.
Way back, they were only selling books, remember?
Hmm.
Before they became the global marketplace.
Yeah,
So they grew. Yeah.
they'll ship me a single battery in 2 hours now, which is pretty wild.
Good, good.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
all like super exciting stuff, and I know in the larger scale of things. So there's like the
yeah,
virtual reality, which is like the one to
yeah,
one.
yeah.
Then clinicians also, I think, for many years were looking at 3D glasses based technology, like the cave system, for example, and using
Right.
um, as like to put you kind of inside of the VR headset.
Yeah.
So did you come across a lot of that in what you were doing at Rutgers? And
Um, I, for several reasons, um, had either a desktop system,
hmm.
not a head mount. I never used head mounts up until recently, talking the last 5 years.
Hmm.
I had desktops, or later on I had very large wall size TVs, which were then connected to the computer.
Hmm.
So and it became, a VR system because you had a wall size TV,
Hmm.
which was very inexpensive also. Um, the bottom line, and I think the untold question you have is, do we need head mounted display, or can we do VR on flat displays with or without glasses? And that's an important question to talk about. And the reason it's an important question is for two reasons. Number one, popular belief is, which is wrong. I know I'm going to ruffle some feathers, but that's the advantage of having less hair and white. I can offend some thought processing. Um, you don't really need head mounts to have a VR experience. You can just as well
Yeah.
have it with a medium to large display, and even without glasses if it's an autostereoscopic display, as long as you have fast refresh, good quality image, and interaction.
Hmm.
Okay, the key here is fast interaction and good quality, and of course the content, right? That's
Hmm.
also very important. And if people have any doubts about it, let's think about the games we play on a cell phone, which has become then our entertainment system. And it's only a cell phone. It's not a head mount. And
Hmm.
yet you feel very immersed in that particular game, right?
Hmm.
So that's the content part. All right. And then the second reason this is important is that, one of the things I knew, but I also learned through studies that other researchers have done, comparing the same graphics being presented on a desktop display versus a head-mounted display, uh, in terms of what's called cybersickness. I mean, that's a big bugaboo. We can't not talk about it. We have to talk about
Hmm.
cybersickness. And for those and I have a whole chapter on human factors and
Yeah.
cybersystems. It's so important. The whole reason, first of all, let's define it. It's a form of motion sickness associated with virtual reality simulations. Okay.
Hmm.
And it stems from decoupling or discordant information on several sensorial channels, all hitting the brain, and the brain having to kind of make peace between information which does not correspond. So think that you are in the periscope of a submarine, and you turn one way, and the image at the surface of the sea turns the opposite way. That's pretty much the visual paradigm of a head mount.
Yeah.
When you see the scene, so you move one way, the scene has to move the other way and move fast.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't move fast and you have latency, you get cyber sickness.
Yeah. I'm having a flashback
If
to my first experience with that.
And you can think about it a day after, you still get nauseated.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. And then also you move in VR between different locations in the world that surrounds you, right? So the head mount advantage, if you were, is that you do feel like you are immersed, you're surrounded by that synthetic work. But then you have to be careful, not you as a user, but the developer, to try to minimize the sensorial conflict. Because in VR, let's say, the scene comes at you. If you run, right? You run in place, but the scene comes at you. So the part of your sensorial system tells you are running in place, but the vision system, which happens to be the more dominant part of our
Hmm.
senses, tells you are actually running forward. You're not running in place. So
Hmm.
there's a conflict, and this results in cyber sickness. And this is just one example. So there are ways to mitigate that. Of course, if the developers are aware of this, they may or
Hmm.
may not be, you know. Um, and then now that I talked about cybersickness, I'm going to say that there have been studies done, for example, in China. That's the one that I know. They almost had people immersed with their head mounts on for 12 hours straight. That's the
Hmm.
longest that I'm aware of. And then periodically they would ask them their symptoms. Do you feel more nauseated, less nauseated, and so on and so forth. And they compare what happened when people saw the same scene on a desktop versus in the head mount. And it was substantially more cyber sickness in the head mount than on a desktop.
Hmm.
So some people say because it's a desktop, there is less chance of, for whatever reasons, right? The less conflictual, but then other people would say, yeah, but you also have peripheral vision, which kind of tells you are in place, even though the scene may move. Anyway, I can also say the contrary if I were going to argue against myself, as I'm not afraid to argue against myself. And I can share that I told you at Rutgers, I was using desktop displays, and a student of mine who was relatively new to my lab and new to coding had a scene of a boat, um, you know, uh, going over waves.
Hmm.
And the camera, the way he programmed it, the camera, the virtual camera was to follow all the movement of the boat.
Hmm.
So the boat was going up and down, and the camera was going up and down. And within 20 seconds of looking at this, I was getting sick
Yeah.
because the scene was moving, but my body said, hold on, you are sitting just watching it.
Hmm.
So no, the solution to that again is just decouple the Z, height of the camera from the movement of the boat, but follow it in X and Y. So
Yeah.
then the camera will go like this, but not like this.
Hmm.
So, tricks of the trade. But what I'm saying, you can get sick also in 2D or 3D flat displays, not head mounts, but substantially less based on studies that I have seen.
And does this change also as you get older? Like your sensitivity to these types of.
There are a lot of factors at play,
Hmm.
and I spoke about a few of them. I spoke
Yeah.
to the amount of conflict. I spoke about the type of display and the field of view. I
Refresh rate.
spoke about the content of the display, and I spoke about the latency.
Yeah.
But like you said correctly, and then I'll mention one other thing to dispel yet another misconception.
Hmm.
Yes, age does play. The consumption of drugs or being, let's say, having too many beers does also play. All of that, being sick does also play.
Yeah.
Hormonal changes for whatever reasons does also play. Being pregnant does also play. So it's an all of the above thing.
Yeah.
Um, but and that's why it's even more important to look at the user. So if I were to say, okay, I'm a VR product developer,
Hmm.
and I have a perfect product, but I chose to save monies by not doing usability studies or user acceptance studies.
Hmm.
And this is a smart decision. For an MBA, nothing against MBAs, right? For an MBA would say, yeah, I saved some money, a lot of money. For a
Hmm.
CEO, maybe not so smart,
Yeah.
right? Because you may be hit with actions because somebody got dizzy and hit a wall or whatever.
Yeah.
You see what I'm
You get
saying?
kicked.
So you cannot design without taking the user and the consumer into account.
Yeah.
It's a bad thing.
Well.
So yeah, one more thing, sorry,
Mhm.
because I said I want to dispel a misconception.
Sure.
So the misconception is that, or was that women are more prone to cyber sickness than men. So it's also gender based. That's what the general belief was, or to a large extent is.
Hmm.
But and I talk about an interesting study in the book done by Kay Stanley, who used to be a professor at University of Central Florida, and now also has a company of her own. But Kay did a lot of the early and more recent studies, human factor studies.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the studies she did was to compare male and female users, young, yeah, I mean, I should say not elder, just students, let's say, people who are readily available in one's lab, uh, with the same hardware, same head mount, and with the knowledge that some people are more prone to cybersickness and some not. So she did the study looking at the incidence of cybersickness, severity, and recovery. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And first, indeed, you could see that female users were more affected and so on and so forth. But then she looked into something. Is this head mount technology designed around the male or the female user, who typically has a smaller interpupillary distance?
Hmm.
IPD is crucial because that's how you create the stereopsis.
Mm-hmm.
And if you design a head mount that does not accommodate smaller heads, including, not to speak about kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which also by necessity have smaller IPDs, they are at a higher risk of simulation sickness, but not because of their gender or age, but because of the limitations of the equipment. So once she had the same people, but now with head mounts that were more properly fitted to their
Mm-hmm.
head dimensions, women and men were doing essentially the same. There
Mm-hmm.
was no more gender-based difference,
So the
right?
IPD is a crucial part of the equation.
IPD, and again, I'm going to go back and forth between scientific knowledge and industry practice.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, eventually knowledge has to get out of the lab and into a industry being a product that people can use, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we can't really divorce the two. I mean, my philosophy is that, again, from the beginning, we don't do VR just for the sake of VR. We do because we want to solve some problems.
Mm-hmm.
So industry, famous company, uh, Oculus, then became, Quest, the head mounts, bought by Meta slash Facebook, and now it's a Meta Quest.
Over there.
Meta Quest 2, Meta Quest 3, Meta Quest 3S, and
Mm-hmm.
so on, right? You have many, many, many versions. But again, decisions made by MBAs versus decision made by people who take into account the end user.
Mm-hmm.
So when they decided to make the Quest 2 cheaper than the Quest 1, okay, they had a number of trade-offs. One of them, the game controllers who were no longer
Have an example
rechargeable.
here.
Yes,
The two.
no longer chargeable. So your game controllers in the Quest 2, to my knowledge, unless they changed it back to being chargeable, have disposable batteries.
Mm-hmm.
And also, the weight distribution is very important, so on and so forth. So you make trade-offs. Oh, and with regard to IPD, interpupillary distance,
Mm-hmm.
the original Quest had a analog linearly varying distance between the lenses of the display
I
to
remember that.
accommodate a person, but Quest 2 has only 3 presets,
Mm-hmm.
to my knowledge. So if your IPD is somewhere in between two preset distance, you're out of luck
Mm-hmm.
because you're then at a higher uh, risk of simulation sickness just because the IPD is not, the hardware is not well, adjusted to your particular head.
I'm holding it here. I can't adjust these. I don't, not that I know of. Um,
Right. So again, these are all trade-offs, and you have to understand the manufacturer too. Everything costs money.
mhm.
And if you want to make the most perfect head mount there is, nobody's going to buy it because it's going to be too expensive. So that's not a solution either,
Apple
right?
Vision Pro.
Okay. What I'm saying is
Yeah,
there's always going to be a sweet spot,
yeah,
but there are things that are worth it and things that are not really worth it. So you have to be very smart looking at alternative,
yeah.
and maybe ask some people like older in the field who don't have a particular axe to grind for some opinion, and say, okay, what do you think is a better solution and why? Argue your recommendation. Some companies do that, some don't. It's up to them.
Hmm.
Anyway, so we talked about the less propensity of simulation sickness or cyber sickness that flat displays have.
Yes.
Okay. Uh, and then another important thing for technologists like me is with all this hardware, right, that are part of this virtual reality system, we are trying to best address the different channels, sensorial channels, because the more sensorial information somebody receives, the more natural the interaction seems to the person because it's closer to what you normally would have in real reality. But at the same time, of course, the costs increase, the complexity of the system increase, and so on and so forth. So the if you are able to find solutions which remove some of this interface, and for example, again, you showed the head mount,
Hmm.
we went from game controllers to hands-free, vision-based gesture interaction,
Hmm.
so just nothing in your hand. So this is great because you see, I'm talking with my hands. That's my Eastern European background.
And
But
I have
but
an image, by the
but
way, from your book. Should I bring that up?
yes, please. Yes,
This is the one with the different devices that are.
yes, yes.
So let me share that.
Yeah,
The audience would like to see that. It's where things are going.
yeah. So this graphs, the horizontal is naturalness of interaction, and the vertical is immersion. So
Hmm.
the extremes is the best case scenario. You want the most natural interaction and the most immersive simulation or system, right?
Hmm.
So it starts from a 3D mouse, which allows you to interact, but you're sacrificing the freedom of movement of your hand. Your hand has to be kept on the desk because that's where the mouse is. And then we have game controllers. In this particular case, is a Vive controller, which allows you to freely move your hands. But you still have to hold it and it's not light. Then you have the sensing gloves, which are better in the sense that you have a more natural interaction and you can make it learn gestures and so on and so forth. And uh, and then you get rid of gloves, as I said, and the modern Quest HMDs have vision-based gesture recognition, right? So
Hmm.
as long as you keep your hands in front of you so the cameras can see them. If you do gestures behind your back, that's no luck, right? It's not going to do it. And then the last two there to the right is neural interfaces.
Hmm.
So first, and historically, that's how it evolved, the technology. First, external. So you have a number of electrodes which read your thoughts, okay? And then you interface that with the simulation that the user sees in this particular case on a head-mounted display. And the final, not yet in reality, so I'm projecting a little bit, even though it is in the very early experimental phases, is the implantable neural interface. So my humble view is that whether we like it or not, eventually this will become part of everyone's brain. And that will replace all of the current crop of interfaces, because through communication, you can make a person see what the person is not actually seeing in front of him or her, hear, taste, feel, and smell. Okay, so you will have a remote server communicating with this, and also this neural interface will have internal body sensors which will detect your head position, your arm, your legs, and will know if you're walking, will know if you're looking around, and compensate the generated feedback from the remote edge server that produces you will still need an edge server that produces the virtual reality image, or it could be communicating locally to your cell phone.
So I could use
slash Tesla phone, right? Because Pi, they call it Pi, because the Pi, this particular model of a cell phone that Tesla has in prototyping, is made from the start to communicate with their neural interface.
Yeah. So yeah, I kind of wonder what that end user license agreement looks like. You know, hey, we're gonna read your thoughts, but you're gonna have to sign here. You know.
Yes, it's funny, but it's also very serious, because you touch an important aspect, which I, not only that I'm not a lawyer, but also I don't pretend that I have an answer or even a clear idea. Because once you have a neural interface implanted for whatever reasons, okay, who is in control of your own body? Is it you, or is it some remote entity?
That's
You see
right.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's a galore ethical questions that arise that the society is not prepared for it. But the society is never prepared, because the technology progression is always outpacing the society's ability to adopt that particular technology.
Yeah, we've gone way beyond evolution at this point.
Yeah. So the technology is catching up. The society is catching up, basically, and depending on one's, being technophile or technophobe, or being elderly or young, or growing with computers, like the youngest generation among us has grown with cell phones. They think they were always existing. No, they were not.
No.
So all of these factors will come into play, including the ability to be competitive in the new marketplace, where AI, in my humble view, is a problem for certain fields. May actually replace some human specialists. Not because it's going to do a better job, but it's going to do a cheaper job.
Yeah.
So then that the question then becomes, do we think that we don't, as humans, have a play in the VR and AI society of the future? I would say we definitely have a very big role to play, for no other reasons, because AI will always follow the law of the average, because AI is trained on the average case scenario. Because that's the majority of the cases it can be readily be trained on, is the average, not the brilliant or the most stupid among us, right? So, okay, you train on the average, it's going to give you an average answer. If you are trying, if you, meaning Utah or me or anybody else who wants to invent new stuff, is not going to know about it.
Mm-hmm.
So the the danger I see with AI of the future is not only that it may replace humans with average knowledge, but also because it's if the human will totally believe everything the AI will tell the human,
Mm-hmm.
then that's not a good situation either. So somehow we have to maintain our critical thinking.
Yeah.
Somehow we have to maintain the ability to think for ourselves and not accept everything that we see on a display as being, you know, gospel.
Yeah, I was just chatting about this online the other day with
Yeah.
one of the NYU professors that brought up this point about creative writing and how you can just have ChatGPT answer the questions for you. And it's interesting because, for me, I'm an analog guy. I actually would know what you meant if you said page me. I had a pager and I used a payphone, to get in touch with people. So I didn't have a cell phone. So I kind of get all those all that terminology and went through the struggle of being without a device, which many people just they've never experienced that before. But where we are now is kind of interesting. Like we've always had this crutch to just have a question, you go to Google, and whatever Google says, you maybe make it down one page or two pages, and that's the answer. And now you've got, the world's knowledge supposedly in your pocket. And so whatever answer you get from ChatGPT or whatever large language model you're using
Yeah.
is whatever has been distilled, from the algorithm. And so that becomes your new reality because what are you
And
trying to get against?
and and are we pretending that algorithms are perfect? Or are we pretending that algorithms cannot be tweaked for one
Hmm.
reason or another?
Hmm.
And that means, are we pretending that all information around us is valid or not? I mean, all of that are, I think, important questions one has to ask.
Hmm.
But in VR, we are like small little gods. We create our own world just like God created the world. So I tell my students, you are the mini gods, you create your little world there. Let me see if it works. So basically, so yeah, I mean, virtual reality has, as I said, this, you may be being able to tell that, I'm passionate about it. I'm passionate about it because I know the potential
Hmm.
and I also know what it can do. But we need to always think of who is the next generation, who's going to take over, pick up the baton and continue the race. The race it just started, right?
Hmm.
The race is by no means finished. And so that's, philosophically speaking, if I may bore you with that thought,
Hmm.
there are two kinds of scientists in this world. The average scientist cares about writing another paper, publishing another book chapter, giving another talk, maybe getting an award. All right, so he's not average. If he gets an or she, that means you are, high up there. Let's call that person a noted scientist, right? Not the
Hmm.
average, a noted scientist.
Hmm.
Definitely looking to get even more recognition. All right, so
Hmm.
that's one category. The other category, which unfortunately to me it's in the minority, is okay, I'm doing a good job. I'm going to get recognition anyway, but I care about forming a school of new people that will be there to take over when I have to go. Because we don't live forever.
Right. Your legacy.
Or the field, yeah. I mean, leave something behind, and
Hmm.
like almost like the school of philosophers of the Greek philosophers, right? They all had
Hmm.
schools that they were passing the knowledge, and professors do to an extent that too, in the process of instruction. but I'm talking more of programmatic thing. That's why I told you the importance of creating a society to help the young. That's why I told you about the co-author, Philippe Coiffet, of my book, right, the
Hmm.
French, who, when I met the person 30 some years ago, um, he had already published 20 books. I had no clue who I was talking to. I just went to Paris as a young assistant professor, went to his lab, and he wanted me to give a talk, and I gave a talk. And then he got interested and said, okay, I want to visit your lab. This famous guy, right? And I was the young little professor. He comes to Rutgers and says, interesting. You guys are ahead of us um, in virtual reality. And actually, I'm going to send you some of my best students. Let them do research with you. When they graduate, you're going to be involved with their thesis and all that. They come back to France and they become professors and start teaching virtual reality. So he was thinking of how am I going to grow the field in France, his country, right?
Hmm.
And and that kind of he arranged for me to travel to France, and we wrote together the first edition of the book back in 1993. That was when it first was published. The second edition in 2003, 10 years after, translated in many languages, including Chinese. And now, many years after that, right?
Hmm.
Uh, 20, 21 years after that, uh, the third edition, which was, it took me much longer, took us much longer to write because the field had grown too much. Um, but it's still needed, as I said, it's still needed to be able to um, impart knowledge, doing impartially, compare options, explain the benefits and the drawbacks of every option, and and let the students then become professionals and grow the field.
Well,
That's what the field was. Yeah.
yeah, and I gotta say, I was thrilled to know that glasses-free 3D kind of became part of the sphere of devices and technologies, and that it can potentially solve some of the barriers to entry and also help bring students into the field because it's less complex in many cases than programming for head-mounted and whatnot.
With glass-free graphics, it's somewhat similar to gloves-free gesture recognition, right? So
Hmm.
you don't have any interface between your eyes and the display.
Hmm.
There's nothing there.
Yeah.
And the stereo image is there as long as you present half of the scene for one eye and half of the scene for the other eye. So the important thing that's the basis of stereopsis is that each eye sees a slightly different image of the
Hmm.
same world at one time. And these what we call autostereoscopic displays do that by in the old technology, they used to halve the horizontal resolution and alternate bands of pixels,
Oh yeah.
left and right, left and right, left and right. Um, either with a prism, with an optics, or through lighting,
The barrier
backlighting.
filters.
Yeah,
Oh.
yes, and parallax.
Hmm.
and and that created, you could really see floating images somewhere between you and the display,
Hmm.
floating in free air. And since it's always going to be in front of you, so you can move, now you also want to keep the object in fixed while you move your head around it within the area of stereopsis. Then you need to have a camera of cameras looking at the user, determining where the user is looking and compensating the image such that the object will still remain stationary. For example, if that's the scene, regardless of looking from the side or directly in front. Um, but more recent technology has addressed this requirement to half the horizontal resolution by fast changing the lighting such that it is claimed that in fact you don't no longer halve your horizontal, you just play with what's called visual inertia, right? So our eyes have a certain inertia, and like kids know that if you turn the wheel of a bike up faster, you no longer see individual
Spokes.
beams. Yes, yes, folks. And it's all merging because of you're exceeding the threshold of 16 frames per second or 16 changes per second. So if you take advantage of that, that was an important technology barrier that seems to have been resolved. Another a good advantage of large displays, autostereoscopic large displays, is that you give the user a certain freedom of movement within a space. So you can have several areas, positions of the user, or in the future, you're going to have several simultaneous co-located users, and they will all see the scene in 3D because the system will be able to account for each of their particular position and compute and display a curated view for that. Now, one thing we didn't talk about, and it's important, and I don't believe yet that the technology is there. But here is the problem, and then I'll give you the solution. The problem is the larger the display, the larger could be an array, right? It could be one big display, or it could be an array of smaller displays where you have additional problems with continuity and so on. The larger the number of pixels that need to be computed for every frame. So the usual display, for lack of a better word, does not distinguish the particular portion the user looks at any one time versus the rest of the display. So our eyes are such that we have a very small area of our retina which sees at our maximum sensorial resolution, called the fovea. So fovea, right? But because the technology normally does not know where somebody looks at one time, the technology takes a brute force approach in the sense that the whole display is rendered at the highest possible resolution, such that no matter where the person looks at, the user will see a beautiful high-res image floating in front. In reality, and it's starting to creep into head mounts and possibly also experimentally into flat displays, you have eye trackers, right? And eye trackers will look at the user, determine exactly where the user looks, and only create a high resolution area in that particular portion of the screen, and then progressively less resolution, which the person cannot distinguish anyway. So there's no danger, halving still the resolution away from that, because our eyes cannot see it anyway. So it's a waste of energy, it's waste of cost, waste of this, and also limits, for example, in the case of tile displays, there has to be a local area network which feeds all of these displays in the array, right, of the tile display. So at some point, with more and more tiles and higher resolution for each tile, you are reaching the saturation of the local area network ability to, and of course, depending on how many frames per second you are running at, right? So you are hitting that barrier. So adopting a foveating technology for autostereoscopic
Hmm.
will solve that too.
Hmm.
So you can have even larger and larger if you wanted to array or tiled array, because you only transmit a lot of pixels for the particular tile the person is, or tiles the person looks at, and everything else row rest. That means you are not saturating your local area network. And
Yeah.
you also can increase, for one particular hardware, you can increase the frame rate. You
Hmm.
can do both, right? Both of these, which is
Yeah.
all good.
Yeah, and so it'll become like a math problem of the number of viewers, the refresh rate of the screen, and maybe with the foveated viewing, the cost to like the speed of the system and the lag in performance to deliver the content into those areas. Uh,
Yeah, and the color gamut, and how many pixels,
yeah.
how many bits per pixel, all
Hmm.
of the above, right? How
Yeah.
many pixels and how many bits?
Adverse proof.
16 bits, color 32 bits on, right? So, but this, I'm optimistic by nature, right? Maybe you could tell. So I believe we'll find a solution. I don't think that's insurmountable. It's
Yeah.
only a question of money, as usual, and time.
Yeah.
If we have it, it will be solved.
Well, I mean, if artificial intelligence is any indication, I mean, and I don't know when or how long this podcast will be online for, but I just saw Google announcing VO3 with their video model, and I mean,
Hmm.
unbelievable to think how far we've come in a year, 2 years. Literally, you're watching video that's created with characters that can have accents, speak in different languages, complete sound effects, tracks, and music scores that are all done from a prompt. And you sort of look at that and you go, well, if that's the speed at which technology is advancing, you have to imagine that most of these challenges that we're talking about are going to be solved in a much shorter time frame than we had originally anticipated.
No question, again, but we will still need to be in charge, in the sense that
Hmm.
we will have to both steer the direction
Hmm.
and decide what's good and what's crap, right? Because
Yeah.
not everything that AI will spit out will be of what we want, or of value. So
Yeah.
we'll still have to, again, use the critical thinking and decide, this is good, this is not so good.
I have to ask you this philosophical
Yeah.
question because
Yeah.
I was wondering, when you type something in and you get
Yeah.
something back, does that actually give you the reward response like we were talking about earlier that, oh, I got what I wanted, like a slot machine? Because at the same time, I mean, I came from, film school and we were
Right.
cutting film. I learned how to do that. And you get a lot of
Hmm.
reward when you would go in and you would slice your fingers open cutting the film and having gone out and shot it and you didn't know what you were going to get. And then you had to develop your film and cut it. When it came out, you went, oh my God, I made that. What happens when we just go to a world where you prompt something and now in a few seconds it comes back with some video content? Like, do you feel good about that? Are you excited? What happens?
Um, there is a school of thought that the less effort you put into something, the less gratifying it's going to be if it works, because you really
Mhm.
haven't worked at it. So
Mhm.
it may not mean as much for you,
Right.
but that is for people who like to work and like to make a difference. And there are
Mhm.
also others who may like minimal effort, which means it's going to be gratifying because the answer will be right there, and I didn't really have to read 20 books to get to that particular answer. Right.
Mhm.
So again, you cannot take the human user out of this equation. The same technology, right? That's a classical philosophical question. Is a technology good, or is the technology bad?
Right.
And speaking of the most general terms, is
Yeah.
technology good, or is that? So the answer is both.
Yeah.
Well, how can something be good and bad? It's either, because we are trained to, think binary. It's either good or it's bad. No,
Yeah. It's like the discovery
the
of
same.
nuclear. weapons and
Exactly.
power, right?
Yes. Or a car.
Yeah.
A car can save somebody's life by taking that person to a nearby hospital if there's no ambulance available,
Hmm.
or a car can
Yeah.
run somebody over.
Right.
The same car.
Hmm.
So the technology, and the same applies to VR, large volume displays, and so
Hmm.
on, right? So technology in and by itself typically
Hmm.
is benign. It's neither good or bad. It
Hmm.
depends how we as humans use it. Same thing, again, going to look in the future with neural interfaces. By themselves, they are neither good or bad. It's how we will use it.
Hmm.
So, you know,
So to your point about, how we will use it, and I know we're probably running a little over on time, but I'm just having
yeah,
such a great chat with you. We didn't really talk too much about like applications of the technology,
yeah,
and of course I'm a little biased because we're operating in the glasses-free 3D space, and we're doing digital
right.
twins now, and
Yeah.
we keep getting pulled in from clinicians and
Mm-hmm.
so from hospital systems looking to solve problems and using
Mm-hmm.
glasses-free 3D as a
Right.
way to get around some of
Mm-hmm.
these obstacles we've been talking
Mm-hmm.
about. But what are, some of the applications that you see and the use
So,
cases for good,
well,
not
so
evil?
so so we if you think what is the advantage of glass-free 3D
Hmm.
besides natural interaction is also ability to better replicate space, distance, right? And one particular task you do have to have as good a perception of depth as possible, and those are manipulation of objects into the synthetic world. So
Hmm.
any tasks where precision of interaction is important, when you provide both better natural interaction and a better way to gauge distance,
Hmm.
it is going to benefit from this particular technology.
Hmm.
Okay. Now, there are other, so obviously the medical field is one, and typically also anything that has to do with scientific visualization, right? For example, I don't know how many viewers of this podcast are aware that in United States, there's a big push for oil exploitation again. Drill, baby, drill,
Maybe so.
to quote a famous person. And and
Famous or infamous or
I'm going to be benign here.
just like technology, right?
Just like technology. Okay. So the point I was trying to make is the use of VR in this field where you want to provide to visualize 3D data.
Hmm.
Typically you discover an oil field by drilling to certain depths and detonating and recording the sound.
Hmm.
And then there are some specialists which look at those
Seismic.
graphs and figure it out. But
Mhm.
then if you present the same information in 3D, you're essentially increasing the likelihood that your production drill will actually hit the oil threefold.
Hmm.
There have been studies that showed it's instead of 1 in 10, now it's 1 in 3 that hits the black gold. And then on top of it, um, you can better visualize the drill that's done now from the surface to that particular reservoir of
Hmm.
oil, and all the other elements that are in the process. Again, you present it into 3D, and it's increases uh, knowledge understanding and knowledge retention. The same being true, of course, of anything in education, right?
Hmm.
So there have been studies where you present difficult concepts like 3D maths physics, 3D phys nuclear physics, and you present it in 3D, and the student will will understand faster and retain longer the
Hmm.
same information just by the way you present it.
Hmm.
So I would say that there are numerous areas where such a technology finds its place, where there is education in general and medical education in particular,
Hmm.
whether is including again surgical education where there's a place for VR simulations in the medical school,
Hmm.
or whether you're talking about cockpit simulators,
Hmm.
right? So cockpit simulators, um, the technology has gone from pure VR now to XR.
Right.
So
Yeah.
in an XR simulator, you have some parts of the cockpit which are one-to-one replica of
Hmm.
an actual cockpit. And then the scene is VR, and then you look through your head mount in this case, and it's a see-through head mount, so you can still see your hands, but you also see a virtual scene, and you also feel a real uh, cockpit instrument. So it's very powerful. It helps learning. Again, this technology has many potential uses: military, civilian, education, entertainment, medical, therapy. I already talked to you at length about that.
Yeah.
And I have a whole chapter of the book which is talking about different applications of VR.
Yes, we're going to have to post the link to that. It's a Wiley publication.
Yeah, it's a Wiley IEEE officially it's IEEE press.
Mm-hmm.
Wiley produced the book, but IEEE is a publisher.
And,
So
and
anybody Google's virtual reality technology third edition or 2024, this would be it.
and
But
can you
I will
order it on
give you the
Amazon?
link. Oh, it's all over
All over.
Amazon,
Mhm.
Barnes and Nobles, Wiley in Europe here, and it's going to be in Chinese edition in 2 years. They already started doing a translation in Chinese.
Do you
Yeah.
expect is there an audio book component?
No, I didn't think about that. It's a ebook, it's a hardcover book, it's a web book, and some other. So there are four different editions.
Yeah.
And as I told you, there is a freely accessible lab manual about coding in Unity 3D, which also includes two full labs using, you know, um, head mounts.
Oh, it's
You know,
amazing.
the Quest 3. We
Yeah.
we we use the Quest.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and we'd love to point users to our website too, so that they could
yeah,
potentially take the information that you're providing and
yeah,
combine it with magnetic 3D
yeah.
tools, because we have a Unity plugin actually that does the multi-view camera and the side-by-side camera,
And
and they
and
could
that's
build out
great.
these applications. Um, so, look, I wanted to ask you, before we kind of wrap up here,
Yes.
I
Yeah.
don't know exactly who's going to be listening to the podcast, but I assume that there's a bunch of young people out there that are just getting into school
Yeah.
and computer engineering, and then there's
Yes.
maybe on the creative side. What kind of advice would you give to them about sort of the magic of virtual reality and getting in today? What did you want to leave them with?
Well, I have a general advice and I have a particular advice, right?
Hmm.
The general advice to anyone at the start of his or her career is simply persevere. Don't give up at
Hmm.
the sign of the first difficulty.
Hmm.
That is what really separates successful people from those who are not successful. You
Hmm.
do have to believe in yourself and persevere, assuming, of course, that you're doing something you love to do. So that's a general advice. As far as VR, the advice I have is virtual reality is wonderful because you are going to be able to change people's lives.
Hmm.
in ways you haven't even thought about. And even if you are a tech engineer or a programmer or a psychologist or a doctor, uh, it's going to be a tool that will empower you to do more. And if you love your field, whatever field of uh, profession you are in, is going to be a tool that's going to be rewarding for you. And then you will be successful. That's in fact the last three words in my book, because I wish the readers success in their profession. It really will help people achieve a lot, and God knows we do need a lot of achieving.
Absolutely. And VR is a great tool, I think. It's one of many tools that if you're a lifelong learner, you can employ to communicate and then affect change. So yeah, it's such an exciting time to be in the industry, and I'm really grateful for this chat that we've had. I hope we get to do
Uh,
it again before edition 4.
one last thing, I would
Sure.
love to, but one last thing I want to say, I always love to hear from my readers.
Hmm.
So if people want to reach me, the best way to reach me is my last name, Burdea,
Hmm.
Burdea, at
Hmm.
rutgers.edu. Okay. So they can send me an email and I'll be glad to answer. I promise to answer my emails.
That's terrific. We'll make it happen. Hopefully, we don't flood your inbox.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And thank you and best of success to you.
Thank you so much, Greg. This has been great. You have a good one.
All
We'll
right.
chat soon.
You too.
Bye bye
Okay.
now.
Bye.